You can find it in the comments in the meetup event, or it will also be on our YouTube channel. Hi, Ivana, welcome. Hi, Lolita. Okay, so a little bit about, I'm still gonna keep an eye on more people joining, but welcome everyone. I am Christina. I'm the founder of the UX Design Talk community. This is a community, a large majority of our community are early stage designers that are looking for support and expertise to improve their skills, learn how to break into the industry, and how to succeed in their first UX roles. And truly my goal and the goal for the community is to learn the design craft through hands-on practice and collaboration. You can join our UX Design Talk community on Meetup. You can also join our LinkedIn page if you'd like to stay on track with events that we are going to plan in the near future. And a little bit of community events that we're doing in the community. We have design critiques, design challenges, guest speaker interviews, and in-person networking events. These are in Toronto. So before I introduce our speaker, I'm actually going to go ahead and start. I'm going to start recording.
Recording in progress.
Perfect. And yeah, today we have our speaker is Caleb. And our session will be divided in 3 parts. He'll be sharing his insights and answer a lot of the questions that were asked before we started this event. In the second part, I will have a Q&A with Caleb with questions that community asked before. And also we will leave time at the end for questions for him. If you have more you would like to learn about from him, just keep it in mind. You'll drop it in the chat and you'll have an opportunity to ask him later. So without further ado, I'm going to let Caleb take the stage. So I'm going to stop sharing.
Alrighty. Hey guys, I'm Caleb. I don't know, I'm still looking at Christina, but yeah, assuming Zoom is working. I saw quite a lot of people from Vancouver. I'm actually from Vancouver as well. Let me share my screen and then we can kind of go over some of the stuff that I have to share with you guys. Alrighty, if you can see my screen. So like a little bit about me. I'm actually like kind of not from Vancouver. Originally, I'm from Hong Kong. So I came to Vancouver about 10 years ago as kind of a design graduate student. And then ever since I landed in Vancouver, I started working as a designer pretty early on. And then at the first, I'm not really UI and UX focused. I'm more like just doing graphic design and stuff. And then got into UI and UX, started like maybe like 2 or 3 years into my career. So far, I would say that I have around like roughly a decade of experience in design, but like about like 8 years in product design. So other than that, I've been kind of a contractor for the last 6 years. So I was working for design agency before, but then find that, like contracting just give me a lot more exposure to potential client and then get more work that I like to do. So I was kind of contracting and this at the same time kind of running my agency because I feel that, like having an agency just kind of make it a little bit more easy to find clients or just make myself look a little bit bigger. And also within the agency, you have kind of help from other people from different areas in design, for example, like local design or even like developments. So far, like within the last 6 years of running the design agency, Alfio, I call it, we have kind of maxed out at around like 400 grand per year revenue. So besides all that, like I have like kind of a side startup as well called Clascity. So I have some link in here. Actually, you know what? I'm gonna drop this link, this stack link, because I have like some of the link to my other parts of the talk. You guys can check out as well. So I'm just gonna drop this one in the Zoom. Give me a sec. How can I bring back Zoom? So here, if you would like, you can follow it. So I have the whole deck on Figma, so I'm not using Google Deck for this one. So the whole thing is on Figma. So I have another kind of agency called, not agency, I started more called like Clascity. So it's more for people to kind of book classes and all that. So me, myself, I kind of designed the whole thing and then coded it and then work with my team on the back end side of things. And then lastly, right now, I know that the talk mention that I am working at Google. So currently I'm contracting at Google. My contract is going to end in April. So whatever I talk about in this kind of talk, I'm actually taking the practice as well, because I'm going to go back to the job market, and just like a lot of you guys looking for work and all that stuff. So this is kind of a quick about me section. So I like for this part of kind of the talk, I'm trying to like keep the whole thing to be a little bit quicker and smaller. So I don't want to keep talking, and I want to have more time for actually questions. So I'm gonna go over some of the deck slides. If you're joining the kind of the Figma link, this is actually like 7 slides. So we'll see how quickly we can get over those and get into the question part. So when we talk about the reality of being a designer, I feel like when we're talking about standing out as a designer, I think like it's definitely important to realize what is the designer kind of role right now out there, right? So I saw that some of your question coming in asking about, is it a designer, is it saturated market and all this stuff. So I want to kind of quickly cover that part as well. So I think like as a designer right now, especially UI and UX designer, is definitely a little bit more increasingly competitive field. So I noticed that because I run a YouTube channel, and my YouTube channel started around like in 2017, and back in that time there's about like 10 people talking about UI and UX design, and right now if I do the search again, like there are a lot more YouTubers talking about that, maybe like over like 100 designers right now on YouTube talking about UI and UX. So definitely there are increasing interest in UI and UX design, and also like UI and UX, if you're talking about like working with client, it's pretty international. So you have like people coming from like Europe, you have people coming from like India, China. So if your company want to outsource it to China, India, you're definitely competing with a big pool of people. So it's definitely increasingly more competitive, but does it mean that, like the whole kind of graphic design field is pretty much done, like you cannot find job? And I don't think that's the case. So there are a lot of people, but there are also a lot of people that don't have the kind of technical skill to actually achieve a certain level to be able to find work. So I would say that as long as you're better than around like 70% of the people, you can definitely still be successful, and that required you to have a lot of dedication in your design work. So for example, like if you are working on design right now and then you don't really lose sleep about a bad design that you created, I think you need to try a little bit harder, and then your attention to details as well, right? Like, are you kind of a pixel perfect type of designers and trying to achieve like the greatness in your design, right? So I think like it's pretty cliche to say that, but your work definitely reflects how successful you are. So I think like if you're trying to get better every single day as a designer, I think you can still make it, and I'm gonna have like some kind of tips and tricks to help you to get there as well. So the goal of kind of the whole lastly, you mentioned, I feel like the kind of the graphic design type of things right now, especially in UX, is sort of a low risk and high reward. And why would I say that is because, like I feel like as a designer right now, like especially UI and UX, you don't really need to have a lot of kind of like degrees or whatever to support your career. So you can, totally learn the whole thing online. So there's a lot of, channel right now. You can potentially just go online and learn the craft. YouTube is a pretty good one. Also, there's a lot of courses you can join, but like a degree that you have to put in a lot of upfront costs, like thousands of dollars to learn. I think it's not necessary as a designer at this kind of day and age. So as long as you're trying to ground, you can potentially have like a pretty high reward, which is 6-figure salaries and stuff like that. So what is the main goal of this talk, right? So when we're thinking about, getting yourself, kind of setting yourself apart, I think the main point about the whole thing is to really like finding job at the end, right? So like, how do we actually find work? Like if you're a freelancer, you definitely want to find as many clients as possible, right? So how can you actually get to the point where you're able to find work? And I assume that a lot of you guys coming to this chat right now, I think some of you guys are a little bit more junior in your career. But then even if you're a little bit senior, I think some of this area may still be able to help you to find better client or better jobs later on. So a couple of things to remember before I get into the whole talk is I like personally, I feel that, like our design, like the portfolio that we present to people kind of account for about like 60% of your success as a graphic designer or as a UI and UX designer. And then the other 40% is basically your marketing skill. And so basically what I feel is, I have met a lot of people that has very good job of their design skill, but then they are pretty bad at marketing, for example, like networking with people, marketing, how to reach client, how do you talk to the clients. And these people, like, you gotta have both connected to be 100% to be a great designer. So you can't really have like one without the other one. And then I also met a lot of people that don't really have design jobs, but then their marketing skill is really good. They still get a lot of project coming in or a lot of like really high paying jobs. So this is really like half. So you need to have like half in your mind. You can't just be like focused on one area without the other one. So let's talk about like how do you actually get better in your kind of like improving your design skills and all that stuff. I know it's pretty generic. Who knows, doesn't know like improving your design skills, right? But like I would say like right now, I like personally I know a lot of people that kind of talk about, design is pretty hard to get into. Like it's very hard to find work. Most of their friends don't get a job after they graduated from university or graduated from my course. So a lot of people feel that it's very hard to get into this field, and they struggle to find work after they have a portfolio. So I would say that, like if you have a portfolio right now currently, so just kind of like hard truth that you have to kind of work out with yourself, right? So for example, if you have a portfolio right now, but then you still pretty much struggle to find work, I would say that your design skills probably need to be improved. And like my thinking is that, sort of like when you're thinking about if you are selling your product, if you're selling an orange, right? Like in the market right now, there's a lot of oranges, people are coming to buy orange. If you're trying to sell an orange, but nobody ever buy your orange, there may be like some problem with the stuff that you're selling, right? Maybe it's not big enough, maybe it's too expensive or whatever, right? And orange does, deteriorate. Like if the longer you have your orange out there for sale and nobody buy it, it does get worse from time to time, right? Like same as your design portfolio, design is a very fast changing stuff. If your portfolio is still stuck at like, 5-6 years ago, then your portfolio may not be up to date. So it's pretty important to evaluate your portfolio and see if there's something that you have to be different to sell, right? So I would say that like portfolio is the big part, so I'm going to focus a bit more on that in this talk. So some other thing too, I'm sure if you're a designer already, design fundamentals, but that is very important to mention that as well, because like if you don't have the page layout ideas, right, like what drive attention and all that, I think those fundamentals is pretty important to improve your design skill. And you can see I have like a couple of links down below in here that I would recommend that you guys check it out. And a lot of these stuff I don't have time to kind of cover in more details, and I do have like my videos on YouTube that you can review it if you would like. I have a series that where I talk about some of the design fundamental stuff that may be helpful if you're designers and just trying to figure out this whole thing, right? So if you're interested, check out some of those videos. And I think like part of the practicing exercise too is I'm pretty sure you heard of it before as well, like not just myself, right? Like I started practicing design by copying other designers on stuff. So I think this is one of a very good way to kind of like help you to improve your design skill is by just copying other designers stuff, right? So it's hard that to just copy, right? Like if I ask you to copy YouTube right now, it's probably difficult for you to do that. I have a couple of like different tasks on my YouTube channel that you can basically just follow through, copy the link and practice it with a Figma link. So I think like if you're young to a design kind of like this UI and UX thing, and you wonder how does the whole thing work, right? How do people design a website and all that, or product design, app design, right? Then I think like these kind of design practice exercise will definitely help you to get into the design role and understand how to use the software, how to create screen exactly like that. So if you're interested, I feel like the practice exercise is definitely one of the way to get yourself, let's say if you're level 10 right now, after you finish this exercise, I believe you will be, let's say, at level like 20 or like 30, just a little bit higher than what you are right now. So let's say that you have some skill right now, you know how design software work, and then your design portfolio is not good enough, but how can you actually rebuild a portfolio that can actually help you get work or like stand out from this like millions of designers out there? And so I have a couple of key points in here. I'm gonna quickly go over them. So The first one is I feel like building a portfolio is like a lot of people wonder like, can you take a look at my portfolio? Can you take a look at like what is the best way to present myself in the industry? Like people look at my portfolio, they don't really find the information they're looking for. So I feel like there's a lot of like thinking into building a portfolio for yourself. And in my opinion, I feel like building a portfolio is not the most important thing as a designer, but it's more like focusing on actual project that you work on, because the client hire you to design the app for them, not designing a portfolio. So I think like for myself, right, like I don't really have a portfolio anymore. I do have one, but like it's very, very outdated. So I feel like people can just get away with using Dribbble for now, and then walk through their design project on their Figma file. So I have like a couple of things that I can show you guys later. But like just a couple of key points is like in your portfolio, I feel like you don't really have to have a bunch of stuff too, right? Like your portfolio can be pretty like niche focused. So for example, like if you have a portfolio that you call yourself a UI and UX designer, but then you have a portfolio that you also post like movie poster, logo design, some kind of like drawing and stuff, right? Like I know it's art related, but it may not be like related, especially for people hiring you for, right? If they hire you for like a UX designer, then you probably want to kind of focus a little bit more into the UI and UX aspect of your portfolio. So other thing too, I think is a pretty damn important point, is I saw that a lot of people, especially a school project and all that, it will have like kind of imaginary project on your portfolio. So I think imaginary project is good as a practice, but actually putting it on your portfolio may be a little bit tricky, because like people can definitely tell that your project is not a real project. And as a UI and UX designer, it's pretty important to kind of, when you're working on your design, it's pretty important to think from the user perspective. So when you don't have like actual user using that kind of products, it's very hard to like know already like how people user behavior is on that kind of stuff. So it's just important that you're like working on real stuff with real clients, right? So but then like you may ask like, hey, I'm pretty young to my career right now, I don't really have project that I can work on. So I have a couple of links down below here too, that you can, these are the project that I like personally, that is my previous project with real client, that you can potentially take the project brief and work on it, and then eventually just call that, this is actually for a client in your portfolio. So these are the brief that you can, just take a look at the brief, and then they have like descriptions about the task, and try to design something similar that with a potential client in mind, right? So I have kind of a person that I used to mentor, that she was taking a couple of these projects and then eventually turn them into a real type of stuff that she can present on her portfolio, and eventually getting a job. So I can show you a little bit about like kind of her process on doing that as well. But then when you have a couple of projects, I think it's important that like when you have something on a portfolio, I think it's important that you want to showcase what you can get, and then get some real clients. So let me just do a quick look on some of these websites. So I know that like some of you guys ask like how do I actually find design clients and all that, right? And some of the platforms out there, for example, like Dribbble or other website that I'm going to talk about, like some of these platform is actually pretty helpful for you to kind of be able to access to a big group of clients. So especially when you're trying to build out your portfolio phase, it's important that like you kind of understand what is your situations right now. I know it's pretty difficult to actually get client that will pay you a lot of money right now. So in this building portfolio phase, you can find client that literally pay you little to no money, but you can actually work with the mindset of building a portfolio and just getting a step into this whole kind of building a portfolio part. So let me just, instead of talking, I will have this kind of real project that I have done with like my mentee. So she took one of my projects like in the list that I sent out. So this is sort of like what she come up with that you can potentially showcase to you. I mean, of course, this is not organized or anything. This is basically her first type of project that she was getting into, but you can see it's pretty rough. Eventually she kind of improved her design skill that way, just thinking through the problem of like, hey, what is the so based on this product brief, right, like she was able to come up with a description and then figure out like the user personas and all this stuff, and then coming up with like some basically wireframey stuff, and then some like very, very, very basic design work, right? So she showed this kind of stuff to the potential employer on Dribbble, and eventually she got a couple more people that were willing to work with her for like no money at that point. And then eventually you can see her Dribbble profile right now, and then she was able to get a couple more clients on her, like to work with her, right? And then she keep improving her design skills. Eventually she got to a point where she had like some more presentable stuff that she can put on her Dribbble profile. So that is a way that, you know, how I think you can build your portfolio as well. So starting from like, so basically just like very, very wide from you stuff, and then get your style, like some of the stuff that people can review, and then you put yourself out there on the internet, contact people on Dribbble or on some kind of like social media groups, and then just basically tell them that, you know, I'm a designer right now, I'm looking for work, and then this is what I can do. I can work with you for free, but in exchange, I just want to get some experience and get to, you know, working with real people. So you can get through it that way as well. And then once when you build a portfolio like that, I think you're pretty good at a point where you can look for a real job. So that is basically how I feel like, you know, as a designer, you can get yourself to have a portfolio that's more presentable. If you have outdated work, that may be a pretty good way to kind of refresh that. So lastly, the last slide I have here is how do you actually marketing part, right? So the last part of this kind of the whole thing is how can you market yourself like a pro? So in this case here, I feel like, you know, if you have your portfolio, you don't really know how to reach out to people, I think it's pretty important that you do a couple of things. So first is like you should know that, you know, your portfolio basically right now, your portfolio is something that you're trying to sell to other people. So practicing your sales pitch is pretty important. Your sales pitch is basically just how do you walk through your portfolio, how can you have people, just basically if people are asking what can you do for me, right? How can you walk through it from step to step? And the second is, I feel like finding a job is a number game. So the more people that you reach out to, the potentially higher chance that you're actually going to be able to find a client. So for me, my case right now, for like what I'm doing, I'm a freelancer. So every single day right now, I would have a couple of sites that I go daily. So if I reach out to, let's say, if I reach out to 200 people, I may have, you know, 20 different calls, and then eventually I may be able to close 1 or 2 sales. But how can you actually reach out to that many people on a given day, right? So there are a couple of websites that I go to every single day. Make it a habit that, you know, every day when you wake up, should be the first thing that you do as your design kind of like outspecting journey, is to just go through a list of job sites and see who is hiring, and then keep applying for jobs that are currently out there. Again, like Dribbble is a pretty good site that you can go on and then find some of the potential client. You can like filter the range. And then here I have Google as well. They have a bunch of jobs every single day up there. Behance as well. Every single day they will have like some new jobs. Working Not Working is pretty great too. It's a great way to find high quality clients. I actually get my Google contract from this site. And then eventually you have like Angel.co as well. I use this site to get a lot of my clients, and you can see people are paying pretty good money on Angel.co. So this is one of the prime way that I get a lot of like really high paying clients from this website. You can see that, you know, some people are paying like 180 grand to 200 grand. So that is pretty much the outbounding part. And the outbounding meaning you're reaching out to people, and eventually inbounding meaning people reaching out to you. So you also want to put your portfolio out there on Dribbble, Behance. You can put your work on LinkedIn. YouTube, I just put a slide in there because YouTube, I don't really use it as my portfolio, but more like as a place where I can establish some kind of authority in this field that people can look at and hey, you know, this guy talk a lot about design. So these are the platforms that you can potentially put your portfolio out there that people will be able to find you. And then one of the very key way too, I work on it a couple of times and you work pretty damn well, is when you guys reaching out to jobs, like if you are just applying through that main kind of application page, you'll be competing with like thousands of applicants out there, and most likely your portfolio would not be discovered, or people just won't click into your link or very quickly jump to another applicants. So one thing that I feel like it worked out pretty well for me is like instead of applying through that direct link, you can find a way to talk to the CEO of the company. So this way I can basically bypass most of the applicants and then talk to you. Let's say if you want to work with a startup the CEO probably knows like how things work within the company. So this way I can really like just talk to the CEO directly, send my message, email to that CEO. And then if you wonder like how can you actually reach that CEO, I have kind of a video talk about that as well. You can bypass so quickly in your competitions and bring your portfolio upfront to the person that actually matter. So that is pretty much like my talk. I know it's pretty quick, and just want open to kind of questions, and potentially I can answer some of your things that you already asked in the meetup page as well.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Caleb. I want to cover about 3 questions that were asked beforehand in the community, and then I see a few questions in the chat. I'm looking forward to open up Q&A to the public very shortly after. So one question from Dritika, they asked how to get comfortable with your work being seen for someone that is new to the field.
Get comfortable with the work being seen. I feel like it's like, for example, like one of the things that I mentioned about here is like you have to make sure that your work is, you're proud of your work. So if you're posting stuff on your Dribbble profile or like putting stuff in your portfolio that you're not 100% sure, then you may wonder like how people look at your work. But I would say like a key, kind of a rule of thumb is like for myself, right? Like I work on a lot of projects, but I don't post every single thing on my portfolio. I only post stuff that, you know, I feel like it's about 70 on my portfolio. And then once you put it, right, like it just basically put your best foot forward. Like whatever you do, make sure that the stuff you do can pass yourself. And then like how people are viewing it, I think it really depends. Like people can, if you don't like your work, right, they will just move on. But at least like if you're doing something relevant, if you're UI and UX designer, you're posting UI and UX work, and then you're matching that with your kind of your year of experience. Like let's say if you're, you know, very junior designers, right? You say that, you know, 2-3 years, and then you put out work like that. I think that will definitely make sense. So anything that makes sense can pass yourself, can, you know, like people understand your skill level. I think that is basically what the meaning of your portfolio, right? People want to know like what level is your skill is, and then if you're doing exactly that, I think that's great. And then you can use the other 40% that I talk about, you know, how do you present yourself, how do you showcase your portfolio, how can you talk to people, because at the end of the day, like it's really just human to human connections, right? Like how can you move the other person with your words? I think that's really what matters. But yeah, that would be kind of what I think.
Awesome. Okay, we have a question on the topic of AI, and Aaron is asking, is embracing AI now a great way to setting yourself apart? And a similar question from Panel is, with the changing trend, is it important for an individual contributor designer to take up a course or join a bootcamp to learn about the impact of AI on UX?
Like for the AI part, it's actually pretty funny. I actually have a chat with one of my friends as well about...
Caleb, you're on mute.
Oh, am I muted? Oh, one sec. Yeah, so for the AI part, I think it's actually a pretty interesting thing that to think about, because when I'm working at Google, right? Google is definitely a pretty AI focused area, and then we were thinking about like, can AI eventually kind of replace UX designers as well? And my opinion is like a lot of tasks right now as a UX designer can definitely be replaced by AI. So it's definitely a pretty like interesting thing to think about, right? So let's say when you're doing your research right now, UX research, right? You're talking to potential people and all this kind of stuff, right? And you're asking how they're using their app, their user interactions and all this stuff, and potentially like this can be done by AI, right? Like AI can track how often people are using a certain thing, like how did they hold their device when they're using an app and stuff like that, right? So a lot of things can be tracked by AI, but I think like deep down is even AI can help a lot in the UX design process, like helping you understand user behavior a little bit more. But then at the end of the day, like it's really about the human touch, and we are changing very quickly as well. So even if you get a lot of data from AI, you still need some people to actually integrate those feedback or whatever data into the product itself. So how do you actually design the product part is still like a pretty important point about a UX designer So I feel like you can definitely use AI. I mean, I'm pretty sure there are a lot of tools right now to help you understand a little bit better about like user behavior and all that stuff. But like for the actual implementation part, I don't think AI is enough to catch up with, because of all this, like you should be doing this and or like design the app entirely from AI. So it's definitely you can incorporate AI into your workflow when it's available, but I feel like the human touch is still one thing that machine cannot overcome right now. And for like, should you join like a UX course or AI plus UX course? I think it's interesting. If there's a core available right now like that, I think you should definitely join it. I'm not sure if like a course like that right now at this point would be like up to date enough, because like ChatGPT is pretty new, like the stuff about like the whole thing. I mean, like ChatGPT has been around for a while, but like it just recently become very popular, and everyone's talking about that. So I feel like a lot of like what people are talking about AI and UX is as good as what you understand it right now too. But if somebody has like pretty insight about that, I would definitely say join it. If a course, I mean, I'm looking for courses as well. If there's anything interesting about AI and UX, I think it wouldn't hurt to join it. But like the stuff is, if, at the end of the day, UX is still pretty human, so we need human to connect with humans. So you can use machine to help you with the task, but I think like you are the person to be still designing it. So I don't think UX designer is gonna go away anytime soon. But yeah, I have to answer it.
Awesome. Okay, and one last question before I go to the questions in the chat. To stand out, and that questions come from Rahim and Sarah. It's a combined question. To stand out, how do you leverage previous work experience in adjacent fields?
So I think it really depends on like what type of field that you previously worked at before becoming designers. So for example, if you're working as a barista in a coffee shop and experience like that, right? I don't think you can necessarily share like that kind of stuff in your portfolio, but like a lot of like human connection skill that you can potentially reuse. But I would say, at the end of the day, UX design is really, really like just how people interact with each other every single day, right? So if you're working in a particular field, you will know a lot about that field, and some other people may not understand about it, right? Like if you're being an accountant, you may know a lot about like the pain point of being an accountant. So it's a lot of like stuff that you can potentially bring over as a UX designer, right? You're basically just solving problems. So if you have a certain set of problem that you experienced in the previous environments, you can definitely bring that over and figure out a way to kind of help you solve that. But can you actually bring like past experience to put on your portfolio? I think you can, but then one thing that I mentioned in the talk as well is like you want to be kind of niche focused. Just think about, if you are going to a ramen restaurant and if you want to eat ramen, right? Like, would you rather go to ramen restaurants or like go to a restaurant that sell a lot of things plus ramen? So a lot of people will go to the specialist for certain things. So if you're talking about like bringing your previous work experience on your design portfolio, you have to be really clearly demonstrating how that related to what you do right now as a UI and UX designer. But if you can connect that, I think that's great. But at the end of the day, yeah, like I said, right, it's really about like solving problems, and then if you experience something else, then you can find a way to figure it out and solve it. And fact is, a lot of founders of a company, they're actually a different field, and then they come into kind of entrepreneurial role to solve that kind of problem, and then they also call themselves a UX designers as well because they're figuring out a way to solve a particular problem. So but that would be kind of like how you can connect that. Me myself, like I am teaching swimming before I developed the Clascity platform, kind of like fitting in my use case, if that makes sense. Yeah.
Okay. All right, so I'll move on to the questions in the chat. There are quite a few questions, and I see people reacting to them. So I'm going to choose from the ones who have more reactions. So if you can check in the chat, if you can relate to a few of the questions, please react to them, and that we can bring it up into conversation. Okay, so Anastasia is asking, there are hundreds of junior designers, if not thousands, and only a few job openings for junior UI/UX designers, if any. Most companies don't want to train newcomers and are looking for middle senior designers with experience. Mm-hmm. How can junior UI/UX designers with no experience but with a few projects set themselves apart?
Yeah, that's a very good question. I think do you actually you fit into pretty well into like what I talk about with my kind of mentee. She never go to a design school. She went to Bring Station and take a course in Bring Station, and that's it. She literally have like no experience, no power experience, right? So she doesn't really know like even like design screens like that. She just don't really know how to operate a design screen. So I would categorize her as like junior designer, but everybody kind of get over the junior designer part. Once when you get a design job, then you work at the job for like a couple of years, then you're mid-level designers, right? So you just have to find a way to break into the environment where you can start building your experience level. So yeah, like there are 1,000, not even 1,000, I think I would say million if you're talking about like in a world stage, right? Like there are a lot of people trying to get into UI and UX, and everybody get through a phase where they have no work to show, don't really know how to find clients. And that is where I think like this kind of talk is really about, right? Is how can you actually build a portfolio out of nothing? And I think like building portfolio, uh, setting yourself in a way where you feel like you have some real life experience, which is working on real project and understanding fundamentals and all that, can really get you to a point where you have a decent portfolio that you can display. Not really work like that, I mean, I wouldn't put work like that on my portfolio, on my Dribbble portfolio, but that is good enough to show potential client where I know how to operate a software, I can work with you. I mean, I'm pretty passionate about working with people, and then I can help you to build your MVP. You don't have to pay me nothing. I just want to get some real experience working with real people. Once when you get into like a couple of projects like that, working with real people, then you can call yourself a junior designer, or depending on your skill level, right? If you have like some pretty good stuff to show in portfolio, you can call yourself whatever you want to call yourself, right? So at the end of the day, it's really about your portfolio. Nobody knows like how many years of experience you have. If you have like really polished work on your Dribbble profile, right, people may assume that you have like like 4 or 5 years experience, but you may only have like half a year experience, right? So I think in this design world, one good thing about that is your portfolio is pretty hard to prove like your year of experience, but it's very easy to prove your skill level. So as long as you have a decent portfolio out there, you can already stand out from like thousands of applicants out there. And then once when you get into the job, just stay there for a couple of years and then keep improving your design skill, and then you have like more and more stuff that you can present in your portfolio. The more stuff, the better looking your stuff, then the higher value you are as a designer. So that is, I would say, how do you break in to the design world, and how do you kind of like make yourself stand out. But yeah, that's it. The few project part, I mean, it really doesn't matter. You don't have to have like 10 different projects to show in your portfolio. Like you can be pretty precise, like as my as my showcase, right? She only have like 2 to 3 project, and then she just duplicated it. So Dribbble, you can have like shots of the same project, like 3 or 4 shots of the same project. You can totally go with that. So you don't have to show a lot, but people really have to understand like how does your design and how should your design thinking process. You can walk through that on your Figma file, like that is my user persona. I get to that and then do this and that. I think that would be pretty helpful. So yeah, that would be my answer for that.
Okay. And KK is asking, for the young UX designers to get started, do you recommend trying freelancing first or focusing on getting a full-time job with a company? Any pros and cons you would like to share?
I think like if you're just starting out, getting a full-time job may be better, because like what I'm saying is the whole contracting stuff is a tough word out there. Like a lot of designers right now are looking for work, but it's pretty hard to find it, especially when you're talking about like freelancing, right? You want to make a living. So making a living, I don't know like what is your minimum amount that you can get by, but earning that minimum amount is difficult if you have no experience. So you're basically competing with people that are willing to pay a lot of money for your project, and also you're competing with people that don't have money to pay for you, right? So when you're competing with like this big spectrum, the people that have a lot of money probably won't hire a junior designers, but the people that don't have money still want to hire a senior designer. So what they would do is they will outsource this to places like India, places like China, places like Southeast Asia, right? So they have senior designers that are charging so little, and then it will fit those people budget, right? So if you're a junior designer right now, I would say find a full-time job, train yourself in that full-time job, try to get a couple more year experience, and once when you get there, you can call yourself a senior and then start charging a lot higher than like what those countries that I mentioned will be charging, right? So you want to establish yourself as an expert before you get into freelancing. So my advice is, if you're pretty junior, you want to kind of get more experience until you're senior, that you don't like you get to a point where you feel like your career kind of stuck at the top right now. Company are willing to pay me 100 grand, but I want to break through that. How can I still break through my ceiling of like 100, 200 grand, right? Then freelancing may be a good way to get there, because the more you work, the more you make, kind of thing, right? There's no ceiling to being a business owner, so you can do a lot about that. But that would be it. Also, like, just want to quickly mention from the financial perspective as well. One very good thing about being a freelancer, other than like the normal stuff that you can like live in another place and work on the beach and all that thing, you can do that on a full-time job right now too. But the very good part about that is being able to pay less tax. So if you have a corporation, you pay 11% tax, and then if you are being self-employed, if you're being employed by a company, you pay much higher than that personal tax, right? So there's a big advantage for being a freelancer or being a corporate business owner for that purpose. But then if you're a junior, basically you just like that wouldn't matter to you. Basically you're using all of your money for your expenses anyways. But that is another talk, but that is just something that I would like to bring out as well.
Okay. And a comment from Maftuna is that they said, "Thank you for your presentation. My question is how to be sure that the design decisions that I make are actually correct, and in the long term, it will bring positive effect to the company. What UX measurements you use in your daily work?"
Well, if we're talking about daily work, I work at Google right now, and I wouldn't say there is a specific measurements, like what is the client success and all that measurements. I'm pretty sure like the bigger team would know that. But for Google right now, like how we do stuff is, we'll have a lot of like UXR section. Basically, like my design would be passed on to the UX researcher. So they will go on and talk to a bunch of people about real user about like how the prototype works and all that stuff. So the prototype will be clicked on, will be used, and there's a lot of questions asked. So then the UXR person will generate a report and telling, based on this design right now, a lot of people using it this way, a lot of them finding, particular button very hidden, and then they will have a lot of feedback like that. And then we'll just kind of reloop it and improve it, right? So we eventually get to the point and just launch it, and then you can see a lot of like real life data coming in when your product is launched and people are using it, and then you can just iterate that from there. But like you said, a specific master that we have to pass a certain level of responses on a certain thing to launch it. Maybe there is, but I'm not aware of it. But I don't know if I'm answering this question correctly. But like I just think that at the end of the day, you don't want to be stuck at that kind of iterating phase for way too long, because you can working on the same project, same problem within the team for like 10 other times, but then like if you never launch it, you never get like that kind of big data coming in. So we'll say anything get to a 70% point, then you may want to launch it and go out and test it and get some real user feedback, and then you can also iterate it later on. So there's product, product first version is probably kind of shit, and then the other versions will get better and better. So you kind of don't want to stay at a certain phase. You want to keep improving with real people using your product. So I think like the real data as a UX designer is very important. You want to test it with real people and get real feedback. So that's why I also mentioned imaginary project. Like, hey, let's say I want to redesign Dribbble. I want to redesign YouTube. Without any real data backing it, I think your decision making will be kind of not accurate. So I think like as a UX designer, it's really, really important to like interact with your actual users. So that's what called like user experience, right? Yeah.
Okay. Question from Steven. Do you think one project could get you a job, or would you say it has to be 3 to 5 projects?
One project may actually get you a job. Like, to be honest, like if your project is very established, like if your project is literally walking from like the idea phase, which is the product spec phase, and then getting into where do you product spec, and then your wireframing, and then your product map, and then you have a little mock-up, and then you have also like coded out the product. The product is actually live. If you have a product like that, man, like I would say just present that product. And like one thing about your portfolio too, is you don't want to have a bunch of stuff that is at a different skill level point. So for example, right now, if you feel like your design has improved a bunch and then you have a lot of work that is previous work and doesn't really reflect your current skill level, I would say, delete all of the work that doesn't reflect your current skill level, because it's important that people are focused on what can you do best. Because as an employer, right, I will look at your previous project, and then like I may think that if this designer designs something like that for me, I would not like that, but I only like that one project, right? So you're basically just making people harder to hire you if you have like many different things. So if you have one project that is pretty much fleshed out, then I would say focus on that project. You have like different shots of that project showing different use cases, and then walk through the entire process. I think that would be cool. Like, so instead of focusing on 3, 4, you may just focus on one and make that one really, really well. And in my case, I have the Clascity platform, like I showed you guys before, the platforms like that. I designed the entire thing. So this is like literally from idea phase to user, like to basically interview people, potential users, and asking them how would they normally teach a class and whatever, right? And then from like designing, from coding, from hiring a team of engineer and helping me to build this entire thing out. So when I present something like that, right, be able to like walk through from like 0 to 100% like that, people are very impressed by like, wow, you do this entire thing yourself. That's extremely impressive. Like I don't make any money from the platform, but I make a lot more money from getting clients through this platform, through this work that I created. So yeah, for sure, if you have one project that is really hit home, then show that one and delete whatever that you don't feel like it's good enough.
Okay. We have a question from Aaron. It seems that Dribbble profiles and this talk in general is very graphic focused, whereas UX skills are so much more than just graphics. Mm-hmm. What is your advice to stand out as a UX designer rather than UI?
Yeah, funny thing is, UX is very, very hard to tell people visually, because UX is a lot more about like the interview part, right? A lot more like talking to people UXR and then getting back to designing wireframe and stuff. And I'm just gonna be frank with you, like if you're a UX designer and without the UI chops, it's extremely hard to like get through the initial part of like people reaching out to you and wanting to talk to you. So you can have like all this, like drawing on Sketch and whatever, but if people cannot see the final results, you don't even like have that visual interest that people would like to talk to you. And people are just like visual thinker, right? Like for example, when you go to a restaurant, again, like if you buy a pack of chocolate, right, what kind of chocolate will we buy first? You may just pick the one that has a better packaging, but then the inside of that packaging, the chocolate itself, right, maybe the worst looking packaging has a better, tastier chocolate, right? But then having kind of the visual chop can actually help you stand out a lot more. And I do like both UI and UX, and I would assume that if I don't have like this kind of like good looking stuff that I can put on to my portfolio, right, people may not even want to talk to me about how can I actually design the whole thing, right? Because I mean, people need to envision eventually what your product look like, how does it function, how does it work. They want to see the final results and then chasing back to how do you actually create that. So a lot of my stuff right now online is pretty much like just a shot of like, this is what I do, shot of this is what I do. But then like you have to be able to walk through the entire thing, right? When they ask you about that, can you walk through like from different use cases? How do you come up with let's say the booking phase, right? Like how can you go about like handling all this booking system thinking stuff, right? So you have to be able to present all that. But visual chops is quite important as a UX designer too, especially if you're trying to get a job as a contractor. I think like maybe if you're working at like big company like Apple, they may be able to look past that, but for most people, they still ask you about the final results and how to get there. So having some kind of like visual stuff to show is pretty important. And then you can walk through like your whole kind of UX design kind of journey, if that makes sense.
Okay, and a question from Christina asking, do you suggest our case studies directly correlate to the industry we're applying to? How important is that tailoring?
Wait, let me look at the question again. Uh,
Right. So it's, do you suggest our case studies directly correlate to the industry we're applying to? How important is that tailoring?
um, I think it will be good. Like to be honest, like a lot of my client that come to me, they will ask, do I have previous experience designing something for that particular industry? Um, so I think it will be good that if you have experience in that type of stuff, but it will be very hard to just focus on one industry. So for example, if you want to focus on the fashion industry, and then you do a lot of fashion design apps and stuff, you will pretty much limit yourself to like that type of stuff. But it would definitely be good to have experience with that. But I don't think that you should specialize in like one certain thing. As a designer, I think it will be better that you're more fluid in the sense that like anything come to you, you will be able to design for it. So for example, if people reach out to me and they're like, hey, we're trying to build an app for elderlies, right? So can you help us with that? And for sure, you can learn to adapt to how user behavior is like for a certain group of people, and then you can reapply your skill in a different way. So I think as a UI and UX designer, personally, you can have a preference for what you want to do. Me myself, I do a lot of kind of data analytics stuff. So like how to display that complex data on a dashboard and stuff like that. So that is kind of my bread and butter. But can I also design something else? I definitely can. So I would say don't limit yourself to a certain type of category, but you want to be just open to anything as well. Like even like if there's a girl brand that want to reach out to you, right? Like can you help also take on that? I would say definitely your style or your design method and stuff should be able to adapt to different clients. So don't like focus on. I mean, you can have. I don't know. People can have a personality, but I feel like if you have too much of a personality, you may limit yourself to some potential clients as well. Let's say for example Apple, right? I think Apple is a pretty neutral brand, right? If you look at like Apple branding or Google branding, it's pretty much neutral. You don't feel like this is too feminine, this is too masculine, right? Like staying neutral, I think, is important if you want to open yourself to the maximum possibility out there as a designer.
Awesome. Okay, we have last question. Has quite a few votes as well from Togilova. I took a course on Coursera as I'm completely new to UX UI. How do I apply for internship as an entry designer, please?
Yeah, I think it doesn't matter like where you take your courses. I think Coursera is pretty good. Actually, I have a coworker that worked with me on Google at Google. I think she's pretty much self-taught as well. She studied something else and then she took a course at the Google certificates kind of thing, right? So and then like after she finished that, she has a portfolio. She finds some work and then eventually she got into Google and working with me on the Google team. And so it really doesn't matter. Like you can get the initial skill from where, but at the end of the day it's really like your portfolio. As a junior designer, I know it's scary once when you get into the whole kind of new world of finding work and being a real professional designer, but yeah, I would say once when you have it's really like if you have a portfolio, your portfolio is basically your face, your products, whatever you want to call it, the thing that you're trying to sell to people, right? So once when you have a portfolio, then you establish certain value to yourself. And then once when you feel like, I'm confident about this product that I'm trying to sell to potential employer, then just go ahead. I mean, there is no stopping you from getting a job at like big tech company. You don't have to like limit yourself to only startups, right? If you feel like your portfolio is good enough to like get into like even bigger tech companies, then just go ahead and apply. And again, like I mentioned, it's just a number again, right? Like the more places you apply, the higher chances that you can actually get a job at different places. So apply to no less than like let's say 10 different jobs per day. So if you apply to 10 different jobs per day, then in a month's time you will be like 300 jobs, right? So 300 job, I'm pretty sure you can get like some of the contact back and ask you for an interview, and then you can build up your interview skill that way as well. So yeah, don't really at the end of the day, like don't put yourself as a junior. I'm a junior designer, I'm junior whatever. It doesn't really matter. Like your title doesn't really matter. Your work matter a lot more than your title. And I'm sure that like startup will be willing to pay you very good money if you call yourself a junior designer, but you're able to do senior designer work. So if your portfolio is very, very polished, and I'm pretty sure that people will think that you're a genius, if you tell them like, hey, I just started like a year ago, but then I have like this and this and this to show, right? Then that will be a lot more valuable than a person saying that they have like 10 years of experience, but then their portfolio doesn't match up. So just think about it that way, right? Like your portfolio is basically your face. If you have a good looking portfolio, don't call yourself a junior. Just go and apply and be confident and sell that thing to your potential employer. And I think that's really what that matters.
Thank you, Caleb. So we're at time. Really appreciate your time today. If you want to follow up with Caleb, please connect with him on LinkedIn, or you can follow him on YouTube. If you want to know more about UX Design Talk, you can join us on the Meetup group. And if you have any feedback, suggestions, or anything you'd like to see more in the community, please reach out to me as well. I'm always welcome. I'm always happy to hear feedback. And thank you so much, everyone, for coming. I hope it was a helpful session, and I hope we can see you again next time. I'm going to stop recording now.
Recording stopped.